Now, Huckleberry Finn is a story about a boy. Some of you have been boys. And the rest of you had a great deal to do with boys. But Huckleberry Finn is a story about a boy who lived a great many years ago in the Mississippi River Valley. He was ignorant, unwashed, and insufficiently fed. But he had as good a heart as any boy ever had. And he was the only really independent person, boy or man, who lived in the community. And for that reason, I suppose, he was continually happy. Now, in this book, Huckleberry tells his own story all by himself. You don't know about me without you read a book called The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Now, that book was made by Mr. Mark Twain, who told the truth, mainly. Well, some things he stressed, but mainly he told the truth. Why, that ain't nothing. Why, I didn't know anybody didn't lie once without being Aunt Polly or the widow Douglas. Now, the widow, she took me in as her son, allowed she was going to civilize me. She'd cry over me and call me a poor lost lamb. She called me a lot of other names, too. But she didn't mean no harm. Then she dressed me up in some of them new clothes. All I could do is sweat and feel all cramped up. Pretty soon I wanted to smoke, but the widow, she wouldn't let me. She kept saying it was a mean habit and not clean. How I ought to try not to do it anymore. Ain't that the way with some folks? They get down on a thing when they don't know nothing about it. She took snuff, too. But that was all right, because she'd done it herself. Now, her sister, Miss Watson, was a tolerable slim old maid with goggles on all the time saying, "Don't put your feet up there like that, Huckleberry. Don't scrunch up like that. Sit up straight. Can't you try to behave?" And then she told me all about the bad place. I said, "I wish I was there." She got mad then. But I didn't mean no harm. All I wanted was a change. All I wanted was to go someplace. I wasn't particular. She kept saying how she was going to live her life so as to go to the good place. Well, I didn't see no advantage of going where she was going. So I decided not to try for it. Well, I've been going to school about 4 or 5 months, learned how to read and write, and say the multiplication tables up to 6 times 7 is 35. I didn't think I could ever go any further than that if I was to live forever. And then one night, I lit my candle, and I was going up to my room, and there sat Pap, his own self. Oh, he tore into me something awful about getting dressed up and putting on airs and going to school. Pretty soon he'd catch me and took me up to a little cabin on the Illinois shore. I didn't think I'd ever get to run off. Oh, Pap, he was mighty handy with his hickory. I could hardly stand it. I was all over welts. Then one time he gets drunk over in town. He come back saying how folks were saying there was going to be another trial to get me away from him and give me over to the widow for my guardian. He got to cuss. He said, "I like seeing the widow try to get me." Whenever his liquor began from working, he'd almost always go for the government. This time he said, "Why, you look here. You call that a government? Why, you just look at it and you see what it's like. There stands a law getting ready to go for a man's son. His own son. Who's he's had all the trouble and the expense and the anxiety raising up. And just as he got that son raised up, ready to go to work, give him a rest and do something for him. There stands a law ready to go for him. Now you call it a government. Why, a man can't get his rights in a government like that. Why? Looky here. There's a free nigger over there from Ohio. Mulatto. Most whites a white man. He had on the widest shirt you ever seen. And the shiniest hat. gold watch and chain. What do you think? Why, they said he is a professor from some college and talk all kind of languages and know everything. That ain't the worst. They said he could vote when he's at home. Why, that let me on. Why, it was election day and I was getting ready to go vote myself. I wasn't too drunk to get there. And they told me there's a state in this country, let that nigga vote, I draw it out. I said, well, I'll never vote again in my life. That's the words I used. They all heard me. Why, this country can rock for all of me. I'll never vote again. Old Pat, he was so excited he didn't realize where his old limber legs was taking him. He went head over heels over a tub of salt pork. Barked both shins. That's the hottest kind of language. Then all of a sudden he lit out with his left foot. He gave that tub a rattling kick, but it weren't good judgment. That was the boot had a couple of his toes leaking out the front end. Well, he passed out and he cussed some more. And I saw my chance. I ran out back in the woods and found that canoe I'd been hiding. And I got in, I laid down, and I went downriver. I run off. I hid out on Jackson's Island for a time. That's where I met Miss Watson's Jim. He said he run off too. Well, I promised I wouldn't tell on him. Oh, I knowed I'd done wrong. I know folks would despise me and call me a low-down abolitionist, but I didn't care. I wasn't going back there anyway. Well, me and Jim, we found a piece of raft, and we started going down the river. We'd travel nights and hideout days. We just let that current take that raft wherever it wanted to. It's lovely to live on a raft. We just lie on our backs and smoke our pipes, look up at the sky at night time. Not a cloud in it. The sky is ever so deep when you lie on your back in the moonshine. I never noted before. Or how far a body can hear across the water. But pretty soon I'd fall asleep. And Jim, he wouldn't even wake me when it was time for my watch. He often done things like that. Then pretty soon I'd wake up and he'd be sitting there with his head between his knees and moaning in the morning. I never let on, but I know what it's about. He was thinking about his wife and children way up yonder. See, Jim, he'd never been away from home before in his life, and he was feeling low and homesick. I reckon he cared about his folks about as much as white folks care about theirs. Don't seem natural, but I reckon it's so. Well, me and Jim, we kept looking for Cairo down to the foot of Illinois, the Ohio River comes in. We said when we got up there, we would sell the raft and get on a steamboat. Go up north to the Free States, thus be out of trouble. Old Jim, he said he felt most feverish and trembling being so close to freedom. He said when he got up there, he'd go to work and he'd never spend a cent. And when he got enough, he would buy his wife, which was owned on a farm near Miss Watson. And then they both go to work and buy the children. And if their master wouldn't sell them, why, he'd get an abolitionist to go steal them. Whew! That most froze me to hear such talk. But Jim, he never talked like that in his life before coming out flat-footed and say he's going to steal his children. Children which was owned by a man I didn't even know. By a man who never done me no wrong. It was coming into my head he was most free. And who was to blame? Me. They weren't coming down on me what this thing was I was a-doing. My conscience started stirring me up hotter and hotter. Finally I said, leave me alone, will you? Tomorrow morning, first light, I'll paddle ashore and I'll tell. Well, pretty soon it gets light, and Jim, he thinks he sees Cairo. I said, you better let me paddle ashore and see. It might not be, you know. So Jim gets the canoe ready for me. He puts his coat down in the bottom for me to sit on. Give me the paddle. And I shove off. And when I'm about 50 yards out, I hear him call out, "There you go. There you go. The old true hook. The only white gentleman ever kept his promise to old Jim." I just felt sick when I heard that. There I was paddling off all in a sweat to tell on. When he said that, why, I just took all the tuck right out of me. I don't know whether I was glad I started out or whether I weren't. But I had to do it. I couldn't get out of it. Pretty soon here comes a skiff with 2 men on it, with guns. One of them hollered out, "What's that over yonder?" "A raft." "You belong on it?" "Yes, sir." "Any men on it?" "Only one, sir." "We had 5 niggers run off last night over by Hedge and Bend. Your man white or black?" "He's white." So they took off. Well, I knowed I'd done wrong again. Well, it weren't no use teaching me to do what's right. If I'd have gone to Sunday school, I'd have known what to do. But you see, a body who doesn't get started off right when he's little, he just ain't got no show. Then I said, now hold on a minute. If you'd have done right and turned Jim in, would you feel any better than you do right now? No, says I. I'd feel bad just like I do right now. Well then, says I, what's the use of doing what's right when doing what's right is troublesome? And doing what's wrong ain't no trouble at all. And the wages is just the same. Well, I was stuck there. I didn't know what to say. I decided I wasn't going to think about it. I decided I was going to return to wickedness, being natural, being brought up to it. And for a starter, I was going to go to work and steal Jim out of slavery. And if that meant I was going to hell, then I'd just go to hell.